This is Tread Boldly, Leadership Lessons from the Saints, with Father Nathan Cromly.
My name is Father Cromly. I'm the president of the St. John Institute, and this is Tread Boldly, Leadership Lessons from the Saints. Most of us would love great things to happen. We dream of children who are kind, of cities where cooperation is the value, of a civil society where life is esteemed and human rights are upheld. But when it comes to making real sacrifices in order to attain those lofty ambitions, oftentimes our spirits lag. It's easier to talk great things than to dare them. Really making a difference for the lives of others requires sacrifice. There's no other way to defeat the power of evil and build great things except by following in the footsteps of our Savior, the footsteps of one who offered his life on the cross to save the world. And yet, throughout our history, Christian figures have done just that, laying beside care for themselves, sacrificing families and lands and possessions for the sake of the gospel. They've dared great things for Christ and left behind them institutions, customs, and examples of living that inspire and foster the same spirit in us today. One such individual who dared great things for Christ was Mother Angelica, the founder of EWTN. She literally had nothing and founded what will become the biggest broadcasting network in the world. She once famously quoted, "Sometimes to get the miraculous, you have to attempt the ridiculous." Surely this same idea was beautifully embodied by the figure of Moses in the book of Exodus. In Exodus chapter 14, Moses had led the Israelites into the desert, out of slavery and running from the Egyptians. They had navigated their way safely to a camping spot, couched between mountains and facing the Red Sea. However, just at that very moment, Pharaoh had decided to send his army to go and fetch the Israelites back again, back into slavery, back into oppression, to cruelly break their spirit and to rescind his intention to set them free. What was Moses to do? With an army bearing down upon him, mountains surrounding him, and the sea in front of him, there was simply no human way to bring his people safely out. And maybe that's why he looked for a non-human way, a divine way. When everything else fails, there's always God. Hadn't God promised him that he would be with him? And is there anything too much for God? Well, this particular situation seemed to test that proposition. After all, Moses was in front of over 1 million people with their cattle and their chickens and all of their goods, and there was no way for them to maneuver in front of the strongest army on earth, rumbling along with chariots and horses, spears and swords. How could Moses possibly escape? And that's when it happened. He turned to the Lord in prayer, and God responded that he was to stretch his staff out over the water, that he was to be calm, and he was to see the power of God displayed. Moses was being asked by God, in other words, to attempt something ridiculous. He was asked to believe that if he stretched his staff out over the waters would part in two so that his people could walk through the sea to safety. Think about this for a moment. Would you have believed? Would you have stood in front of the people and attempted something so ridiculous as stretching out your hands over water to make a sea part? And that's exactly what Moses did. Sometimes to get the miraculous, you have to attempt the ridiculous. Sometimes God asks us to dare great things, not in a way that we can understand or control, but in a way that glorifies him by our absolute trust in him. Christian leadership, in other words, entails all of the things normal leadership does: strategy, negotiation, diplomacy, planning, stress management, right down the line. But it includes something more. It includes faith, trust in God. Like Moses, we need to believe that if God has called us to something, then he will equip us with everything that we need to accomplish the call. We have only to be humble enough to be brave. Treading boldly isn't always something we do with our own strength, but it is always something that we do with great trust. And like Moses, our success comes from him.